Hello, my name is Jimmy Tran, owner and CEO of Worldcraft Logistics. Today we have a special guest, Guillaume at MTA. And Guillaume, can you give an introduction about your company?
Thank you, Jimmy. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss with you probably about emerging markets for sourcing and manufacturing, and then probably discuss a bit more about Vietnam and how Vietnam is positioned on the map as an alternative for China sourcing. So I'm Guillaume Rondan. I'm the owner and CEO of MovetoAsia. So we've been in Vietnam for roughly 10 years. And then we are providing sourcing and then outsourcing strategies for businesses who would like to get into Vietnam as a manufacturing market, so sourcing destination. And then most of the inquiries that we have is to diversify from China.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about Vietnam's role in the global supply chain right now, with all the trade war and the geopolitics that's going on around the world.
So yeah, I think since Trump just got his second presidency, we see a lot of disruption in the supply chain. It used to be the case from her previous term, but this time I think many companies are aware and are already implementing some type of diversification in the supply chain. Of course, most of them, they want to avoid tariff when it's about importing goods to the US, but maybe companies are well just thinking about diversifying to also access to different skills and then different raw materials that sometimes they are not necessarily originally from China. We have often inquiries from people who will be able also to source the raw material within the country, and then they will obviously benefit from also the lower cost of labor that you have in Vietnam. So in the end, actually, Vietnam makes sense for some specific product categories.
Yeah. So what I see is, that because I am here in the US and I do freight forwarding, and you over there in Vietnam doing the sourcing, right? This main political trade war is between the US and China, right? And China and the US, whichever way you want to see it, right? Do you see more Chinese, as you go to source this product, do you see more Chinese factory in Vietnam, or you see other country also move to Vietnam?
It's a very interesting question, Jimmy. And I think when you look at that, you should look at all the Asian countries. I attended last week to a trade show about pet manufacturing. So all the different utensils for pets. It can be all type of products in that pet industry. It can be toys. It can be silicone products. It can be caoutchouc products. It can also be, ropes to just hang your pets. And actually, by attending to this trade show, that was an internal trade show, I saw many Chinese factories that are right now setting up their sub-factories in Cambodia, not in Vietnam. Meaning that when you have this perspective, when you want to look outside of China, you need to see at the big picture. Some product categories will be very suitable for Thailand, for instance. Others I just mentioned can be suitable for Cambodia. And then you also have Vietnam that can be well known for furniture, handicraft, footwear as well, and then textile, but not textile into also making the fabrics, but more textile as the cut and sew factories.
Okay. But I mean, in terms of, let's just say, in the last 5 years, right? Let's just say in the last 5 years, which country do you think have moved to Vietnam the most in terms of manufacturing? Which country, as in which foreign country has moved into Vietnam to do a lot of business there?
Yeah, so at the moment, US is the number one importer for Vietnam. So meaning most of the factories that have strong export experience, most of the key market will be for the US, right? China, of course, they will be exporting a lot of agricultural products, but when you think about the end product, it's gonna mostly be going to the US. So meaning that US has been relocating part of the supply chain outside of China. So US companies are moving toward neighboring countries. And then obviously the main reason is to avoid tariff, but some of them are also more into a risk diversification. So they cannot keep that just on a compliance perspective. They need to be geographically diversified for their procurement. So they already have this type of strategy for a couple of years.
So if I'm right, we're looking at pretty much the two government that's going at it, and now both side companies are trying to move to a country where it's the closest point to build something, which is American company are going to Vietnam and Chinese company are also going to Vietnam to avoid what their government is struggling to give them hardship. I think that's how you would put it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You see a lot of Vietnamese companies obviously that are on those key sectors, but if you look at big footwear companies in Vietnam, they're going to actually be Chinese owned. If you look at big plastic injection companies in Vietnam, they're going to be Chinese owned, or Japan, Korea. There'll be some key countries as well in the regions who have their sub factory or just a point of contact to manufacture in Vietnam. But obviously, Chinese and the US make those trade nuances and then diversification happen.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about the top product that's being made in the US. In Vietnam right now, from a sourcing agency, your point of view.
Yeah, so I think our number one product category will be furniture. So Vietnam will be imported most of the wood type, and then they will be transforming it, and they will be making the end product. There's been this ancestral art in Vietnam into doing, all the sculpting. So Vietnam is good at that. You find also raw materials of wooden sources. It can be bamboo, caoutchouc, a type of wood, rubber, acacia that can also be sourced locally and then processed and transformed in Vietnam to make the end product. So number one, furniture. The number two, you have all the handicraft products. So China used to be doing that 15, 20 years ago, but it's a lot a human incentive, right? You need to put a lot of manual work into doing that. Most of the weavings to do this product, China doesn't want to do it anymore. So it's been moved to countries like Vietnam. So I think IKEA is purchasing 60% of their handicraft products in Vietnam. Okay, that's quite significant. Then the third product category will be footwear. And same, you have Nike, Adidas, among other big brands that are manufacturing most of their footwear products in Vietnam. And then the fourth product category will be everything linked to metal and steel manufacturing. Again, just because it's a lot human intensive, it requires a lot of labor costs, because the cheaper cost of labor in Vietnam, it makes the country competitive into doing all the welding and then the assembling on those steel products. So that's some of the core products. And of course, agricultural products. Vietnam is exporting a lot of coffee, cashew nuts, for instance, in many markets already.
Oh, okay. So now let's talk about the challenges. What are some of the challenges sourcing in Vietnam, and how does one company overcome those challenges?
That's a very good question, Jimmy. And I think many foreigners are expecting that they can just copy-paste the model that they are doing in China and they will find the same in Vietnam. But in Vietnam, it doesn't work the same. Here, you don't have a huge in-depth list of directories listing all the manufacturers in some key industries. Here, if you send an inquiry to a factory, you have a higher chance not to receive any answer. I just got an email this morning from someone who exactly did that. He sent, I think, 10 RFQs. He didn't have any answer. I mean, at the moment, the situation is a bit chaotic in Vietnam just because of those current disruption in the supply chain. Many companies are looking to diversify. So obviously, factories will be more having inquiries than a normal time. But still, it still means that factories, they don't have sometimes the resources, English-speaking staff who can answer clients.
Oh, good one.
And then after, I think the way to do business in Vietnam will be, you will need to invest more into building relationship with Vietnamese suppliers here. And then you need to proceed to, having visits, flying here in country, shaking hands. And then, you have all this way of doing business here that is not like in China, and it's going to be very, very direct relationship, and then people are very used to, you send a catalog, you send an RFQ, and then you place a test order. Here, you will need to put that extra step at the building a type of relationship with your supplier. So of course, it takes more time than than the way you can do it in China.
Oh, so in another word, sourcing in Vietnam is a lot more difficult than sourcing in China.
I mean, that's why companies like ours exist, and we have a lot of business just because the current market is not ready yet, right?
Yes.
You have this government who is pushing toward having an export-driven market and trying to really make Vietnam as a place to export. But the abilities and then the way it works in the factory, often they don't have yet the same standard and then the same way of just being able to introduce themselves as good as they do in China.
Yeah. I mean, China is the number one supply chain in the world, right? I don't know where Vietnam is placed, but it's not 2 or 3, right? Let's put it like that, right? So the challenge is, number 1 versus, whatever it is that Vietnam is being, right, on the list. So let's talk about the supply chain dynamic between Vietnam versus China. Can you share some of that with us?
So when you think about diversification, or if you are already placing orders in China and you are looking to diversify, it's not you can immediately, again, copy-paste, right? It's not we'll find a factory in Vietnam that will be as equipped as it is in China and then expect to transition your entire supply chain to Vietnam. Here, again, it's more difficult. You need to put more time into the equation. But just considering the fact that not all the raw materials are available in Vietnam. So if you consider, for instance, making garments, most of the technique fabrics will also be imported, meaning that Vietnam should be considered as a cut and sew center, so a place when you can hire cheaper labor people that will be able to cut and sew your clothing, right?
Yes.
So this is one example. Same if you are doing shoes, most of the mold will actually be done by Chinese factories. So
yeah, that's right.
If you are considering a product that includes molding, same, you need to rely somehow on the Chinese aspect. And then if you have already a supply chain that is existing in China, you can often ask them if they already have the same type of supply chain already placed in neighboring countries. So you can transition your supply chain more efficiently and smoothly rather than starting from scratch and then trying really to look everywhere without real and tangible results.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the example of what I'm going through right now. So I have a customer who is an American company who does plastic bottle and mixing of chemicals to make a beauty product, like for salons. I want to keep it very vague because I don't want to give too much information. So they're basically buying their plastic bottle in China, right? And right now I do the freight forwarding, so there's a 25% tariff on it, right? And then there's a possibility of 35% on it. So the customer now is flying to Vietnam with the Chinese supplier, and they both have an agreement. Hey, you know what? I can't buy from you because the tax is too high, and I want to buy from you. And China's like, well, I want to sell to you because if there's no buyer, I'll go out of business. So you have a Chinese company, an American company is importing the machine, importing in the raw material, and then importing in the infrastructure and how to make this product. And you're right, the mold does come from China, right? And now basically they are basically pushing the product to Vietnam, and now Vietnam is supplying the land and the labor so that it could be called made in Vietnam. So indirectly I'm seeing it myself, but things like this take about, I would say, you don't turn that thing on in like 30 days, right? They need to go back there. They need some like politics to get land back there. You know how Vietnam is with politics with getting the land. And so, it won't take, it probably take another 6 months to 9 months to turn on this project, So there is going to be some delay in supply chain, and, people are still going to pay that tax, right? So I was facing it too.
I think I totally agree with you, Jimmy. I think making such a move is not something you can easily plug and play. This is not like you replace a Chinese factory by another Chinese factory. The supply chain is there, the machinery will be the same, and we are just comparing equivalent. Here, just capacity-wise, you are probably doing a few dozen of containers into a certain factory, but here, to be able to find a factory that we have the capacity just to reproduce, that's not always easy to match on a certain capacity, right? And if we include certificate social standards, etc. Again, you cannot expect the same in an emerging market like Vietnam, just like what you have in China at the moment.
Okay. And then tell me about the logistic infrastructure of Vietnam. Like, what do you see that we have over there?
So the two main ports in Vietnam are Cat Lai in the south and then Hai Phong in the north.
Yes.
So often, if you are doing business in northern part of Vietnam, you'll be shipped to those deep sea ports. And then I think cost-wise, it's cheaper to send from Hai Phong than from the southern part. But logistics-wise, it's pretty well equipped. I mean, of course, nothing compared to China, right? But you have containers leaving for Europe and for the US every week. So you can get your shipment ready into certain containers and then your boat leaving. We saw some time it go through Singapore. So this is not direct line. And then you may sometimes expect some delay or some point. So it may create friction on your line, and then you may not get the 35 to 40 days that you would expect at the beginning. So I think this same consideration, if you are thinking to diversify it, also have a look at the current timeline for the sea routes, and see if you can match with what you are having at the moment.
So, you're giving us this tip on like Vietnam infrastructure, supply chain and stuff. Give me what, other than tax, right? Tax is the biggest thing, right? Other than tax, what is some of the reason why companies should consider Vietnam?
So again, for big conglomerates who are already having most of their dependency to China, thinking about diversification is always good, right? You won't put all your eggs in the same basket. This is the same. You should have a network of different suppliers across even the same industry, and then you can be looking at different markets. The second reason can be cost-wise. If we consider just the blue colors in China versus in Vietnam, even though it starts to be rising in Vietnam, you still get a discounted price by having the Vietnamese workforce rather than the Chinese one. Then, as I emphasized earlier, some of the products can be sourced locally. So we can think about bamboo, acacia. There is some type of green grass straw that can also be made and processed in Vietnam. If you are looking for very specific items, sometimes you can really try to find them in those neighboring countries, and don't go to China because you'll be paying a premium. And then if you just expect that you'll be going on Alibaba and then you can find Vietnamese factory through Alibaba, I'm telling you, you get wrong. We have a lot of clients who tell us that they send inquiry through Alibaba, and finally, when we look at the name, that's often middlemen, trading agencies who are exactly positioning themselves well. They are often either from Hong Kong or China, and then they will just be buying the product in Vietnam and then exporting it. So try to go to the source, try to get a bit of information about what are some of the key product categories that can be done in Vietnam. And then if you think that it can really be sourced locally and then transformed and then make the end product in Vietnam, obviously you can get good things out of it.
I see. Yeah, it's the same thing with from my experience with talking to customer on Alibaba as well. When you message a company in Alibaba, I believe more than 50, or I think even 75% of the time, the company on Alibaba are trading companies and it's not direct factory. So I would assume Vietnam having the same problem. That's why but then what I like about China is that when you message Alibaba or a company on Alibaba that belong to a Chinese category, right? You normally will get a response back within 24 hours, English speaking. But for Vietnam, it is a little bit different, right? Okay.
I mean, definitely, Jimmy, I think we emphasized a bit earlier about the challenges. It's not an easy piece of cake to deal with Vietnamese factories. I think the best way, if foreigners are interested to look into that, would be to plan a trip to the country. So there are a couple of trade shows happening in Vietnam. Like in March, there is all the trade show for furniture. It could be interesting to pay a visit to those trade shows. You can directly engage with some key suppliers, and then when you already get catalogs, price code, etc., you can really compare. What are you having in China? What are you having in Vietnam? Try to use this opportunity to also visit the production lines. Often, those companies will be willing to take you to their showroom and then to their factory, so you can have a sense about what are the machinery, what are the SOPs in place, and you can compare that to China, and then you can think if that could be a strategic move or a good move to also try to source in Vietnam outside of China.
Wow, that's a great tip. So, all right, Guillaume, thank you so much for sharing this information. If anyone have questions, please contact Guillaume at MTA. His contact information is below. Guillaume, you have anything else to say before we end?
It was a pleasure, Jimmy, to discuss about this. Hopefully it's going to bring awareness to potential viewers who are also into that same situation where they want to look for different sources, or just they heard about Vietnam, but they're not that familiar with what the country can offer. So hopefully it will bring more awareness about made in Vietnam products.
Okay, well, I hope people will source more in Vietnam, and then if people will source more in Vietnam, remember Guillaume over there, he's going to help you source your product. He's on the ground, he will able to, and he have a team. I believe your team is 10 plus. And so, your team will go to the factory and, do all the groundwork for you. As a Vietnamese, trial in Vietnam is pretty difficult. And if you need freight forwarding, you're welcome to contact me as well. Our information is below. Thank you very much for watching.